Hi, welcome back to Cambridge Inside Out. I'm Judy Nathans.
And over here in this corner, I'm Robert
Yeah.
Winters.
You're always in that corner. They see you all the time. Anyway, so this is okay. So we talked a lot about the budget, which is important. And there were, like we said, 2 city council meetings. And some of what you just talked about with the loan stuff, that was last night's meeting. That was on the city manager's
Yeah. I mean,
agenda, right?
all that happened last night was the introduction of the budget, and now that means is that there was an overview, a lot of
Right,
thank yous, and all of that
right.
stuff, and whatever. But the real substance begins next week for that, and I think it was early
Oh,
June is when the anticipated,
right,
when it's anticipated to be completed,
right.
meaning approved.
There
Um,
there were a couple meetings, well, they had that ARPA meeting
yeah,
where people commented on what they wanted, or they submitted their request.
yeah,
That was
and
interesting.
I
Yeah,
yeah, I actually did
I
I
watched
might have
that.
watched some of that live. I might have just
Well, I taped it and then I watched it.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about that one is that, I mean, it's the inevitable thing happens when manna falls from heaven.
Oh,
Federal
yeah.
money, a large
Yep.
amount of money
Yep.
falls, comes to everybody, really, all the communities everywhere in the
Mm-hmm.
country, really. And there is at least some association with that, by the way, and the current inflation rates, the
Yeah.
increased inflation too. Yeah, but that was
Yes.
expected. But there are some of the allocations have already been promised.
Right.
There was some more of those were settled at last night's meeting. And there's another, I think,
Well,
$33 million that is still up for
right.
grabs.
And
Uh,
also, Mayor Siddiqui announced the 22 million for to continue the Cambridge Rise program, and that's coming out of ARPA.
Yeah, I mean, and again, to nobody should dislike that, because to be so would
Yeah.
be a Grinch, right? But one
Well,
thing
it's made a big difference in people's lives, but you're
well,
questioning, well, how do we continue that? Is that what
that's
you're
my
questioning?
concern about it is that if you basically putting people on a $500 per month stipend that goes, for I think, as they said, 18 months, if I heard it
Yeah,
correctly.
probably.
um, then what happens then at the end? I mean, I like to look long term. It's one thing to sort of say, well, this
Okay.
is all because there's a
Is-
COVID related
Can I
emergency.
ask
Well,
you something? Do you know
sure.
how many people that covers? I'm curious, because that's
Actually,
a lot of money, and if it's 500, how many families is that?
uh, for
I mean, do I do the math? I mean, I don't know if
it's
it's
two.
like that.
I
I
can
don't,
tell you, I did the math. Basically, for
Okay.
$22 million spread
Yeah.
over 18
Yeah.
months of $500 checks is
Yeah.
2,000 some odd
Okay.
recipients. Yeah.
All right. And
But
those are chosen through some other
well,
process.
that's a little bit of a mystery to me. I mean, I'm sure there has to be some sort of application process,
Well, they
but
already have been receiving funds, so somehow a
right.
process was done.
Yeah, but if a lot of that money came in via where you basically got charity, and
That,
there was very little
right.
I mean, there's people making a big deal out of the fact that the ARPA money isn't subject to the restrictions that
Oh,
tax
anti-aid.
the
Yeah.
anti-aid amendment. But if that
Mhm.
doesn't mean it's unrestricted. You still have to basically show a COVID connection.
Well, but
You know,
that one, I'm pretty sure they can. I mean, people have been
to a point,
impacted by
but
the pandemic. Yeah.
right. But it's. I mean, I'm just speaking intuitively here now to say that it does seem to me like what's really seems to be an effort to establish a permanent program,
Well,
right?
then they're going to have to figure something else out then.
Right,
You're
because
right.
the truth is that you can't do it
You
under
can't just
existing
take
state
taxpayer.
law.
Right. Okay.
So I'm anticipating, well, what, let's enjoy it while it's here, sure, but
Well, then they'll
what
just
happens
raise,
in 18 months?
it'll be a grant funded thing, and they'll raise money from big corporations. I don't know. Just
They're
like they
not going to
did
be
with
able to
the,
raise money in that scale anymore,
well,
I
so
don't
maybe it
think.
won't be that much, and
Yeah,
maybe the families will be different. Maybe it'll be a lesser amount. I don't know, but
right.
it's happening around the country. It's not Cambridge Rise. I mean, the Rise program is not just our unique program.
It's not widespread, but there are some
Yeah.
other instances of where
Yeah.
people are doing things like that, of direct
Right.
aid
Which
in
has been
states
proven
without.
to work better than just some of these other things that people through, so.
Well, I think, yeah, I'm not a big fan of just simply subjecting people to bureaucracies pointlessly.
Right,
There are better ways of doing all sorts of the ways in which we do
yeah,
public assistance. And
no, it's true,
if we can find better ways, I'm all for that.
yeah,
But anyway, it'll be interesting to see because it's a good chunk of change there, So anyway, so that was a significant item was I think
yeah.
it was the Cambridge Housing Authority is asking for, I believe
Said
I wrote
quite a
it
bit.
down, something like $78
I
million
don't know why I
or
didn't write that
more.
down, because
I
I
have it
know I
written
watched
somewhere
them.
here. I'm just not going to
Yeah,
go scarfing around looking for it right now.
yeah.
But you got 33 million to give, and one party is asking for 78 million, and it's the Cambridge
Well,
Housing Authority, and
wait, the
everybody
30,
supports housing.
wait, are you saying there's 33 in addition to what's already been allocated, the 65?
They're basically asking for more than is available.
No, I'm talking about what the city has, because it was 65 plus this other, it was like 89,000 total, and some is already spoken for.
Right.
And the proposals amount to 139 million.
Right, but
according to David Kale. So
there's
obviously,
only a fraction of that will be available for it.
that's what I'm saying, right?
But everybody's trying to put in their bids,
Right, exactly.
So anyway, so that's
See what happens. That's
yeah,
that. And then,
right. But one of the aspects of the council meeting last night was they actually did do an allocation of part of that money, of part
Right,
of
and
the ARPA
exactly, it
money.
was 22 million, and Zondervan wanted more detail on it. And according to what the city said, they didn't need to do that. They didn't need to provide that right now or something. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Makes sense to me.
part of the dynamics that you see playing out, and I've actually been watching it
Yeah.
play out for weeks, is that
Okay,
the fact that you had an unrestricted, or at least in so-called unrestricted funds there, basically spawned a lot of desire on the part of elected officials to have some
yes,
direct say so in the
about
allocation of
everything.
money.
That's right.
And
Mhm.
that's not how a city manager form of government works. And what you're seeing is a little bit of a tension playing out there. So if
Yep.
one counselor says, well, I think you have to fund the heart program, and the manager
Right.
says, well, we've decided that we'd rather give money to
Yeah.
the Cambridge Housing Authority, or to support building,
Right.
put money toward building municipal broadband, right?
Right.
I mean, political people aren't really best suited to be making all those decisions.
No. No.
So I think you're seeing a little bit of that tension playing out. And,
Mhm.
while the money's, falling like manna from heaven, you can have that argument, but once the manna stops, then we'll be back to, well, then they'll try and change the charter. We'll see.
Yeah.
That's always in the works. There were a number of other things that came up at last night's meeting. One was that the can that seems to be perpetually kicked down the road, having
Yeah.
to do with zoning and alewife.
Oh,
is-
right. Well, it's
is-
not getting kicked anymore. It's going to a second reading.
Well, in a way, it is being kicked, because
Oh.
what they did was they passed to a second reading a zoning amendment to institute a
Oh.
moratorium
Well,
on
that's what I meant.
development.
That's what I meant.
Right, but a moratorium
Oh,
is
It's
the
not,
ultimate
it's not
example
planning.
of kicking the can down
That's
the
right.
road.
You're
It's
right,
not
because they
really
haven't
planning.
planned it. They had all those years to plan for zoning,
Yeah.
and they didn't do it. So now they're saying, well, wait, we don't want you to do that, even though you bought all that stuff and you have plans. Sorry.
Right. Yeah.
I,
And
it's very frustrating.
Yeah, so
I would
it's not
wanna
like I'm,
be- Yeah.
it's not like I'm seeing any great grand vision. I mean, there was this envision
know.
process, which wasn't the best, but at least it did have, and it kicked off with the first
Yeah,
phase. having to do
what
with
happened to
alewife.
light manufacturing? What happened? I mean, they could have put that in place, and they never did, and now they're sorry, and they don't want to see labs and stuff. Well, guess what? You had your chance and you blew it. That's how I see it.
Yeah,
I mean,
there were a lot of things that were
Yeah.
at least somewhat either tightly
Yeah.
or loosely affiliated with the envision process that
Yeah.
basically all sort of just got scuttled in favor
Yeah,
of
no
political
I mean,
expedience.
I know. It's just
so
very frustrating.
So anyway, so they passed that moratorium to a second reading, which is
Right.
procedural, and it means that you have to wait for, I think, 10 days, and it's basically has to get
Gotta be
advertised in a
publicized, right?
paper of
Exactly.
general circulation, that is to say the Cambridge Chronicle.
Yeah.
And then they'll vote it and it'll pass. But there was something I was a little perplexed by, which was
Yeah.
that there was a gentleman speaking there saying, and I didn't
From the
realize
triangles.
this.
Matthew,
Yeah, shame on me.
he's spoken before. Yeah.
Apparently
Well-
this would apply to both the triangle and the quadrangle.
I know, I
And I
didn't know
thought,
that, but I look back on it, it does include that, yeah.
yeah, and I thought, well, that's interesting. I failed to notice that,
Why
so
don't you tell people the triangle is where all
yeah,
those
and
high rises are?
right, and
That's, yeah.
and for those who went to prep schools, it's not called the Alewife Quad.
Yeah.
That's that's like if you went to Princeton,
Yeah,
up at the
okay.
Quad.
Yeah,
No,
right.
it was these basic the words came from the geometry of the shapes. There
Right,
was a
that's true.
long,
Yeah,
thin, triangular shaped
yeah.
region, which was north of the railroad tracks, south of the Little
Bordered by
River.
Route 2 on the other side,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, really going up to
And
Route
Fresh Pond
2.
Rotary, yeah.
Yeah, and basically it's straddled either side of what used to be called the Ringe Ave extension, which is now called Cambridge Park Drive, right?
Now, is the Alewife subway station part of the triangle?
That
Isn't
would
it?
be at the eastern
Yeah,
edge
that's
of the
part of,
triangle, yeah.
right, the very
Um,
corner, okay.
but then on the space between the railroad tracks and Concord Avenue is more of a
Right,
quadrilateral, so that would
right.
is called the Quadrangle. And that it has been called that, though I think the sort of the Shishi characters are sort of trying to rebrand it as the Quad, which is funny to me.
You know what, I mean, I know this, I'm probably ignorant statement, but all this protest by, I guess, people that live on the other side of that, which to me is almost like Belmont.
Cambridge
They have
Highlands?
all, yeah, but if they have all this say about what goes on there, and I'm sorry, I don't, why? I
Well,
mean,
I think they have maybe,
they just don't want traffic, they don't want this and that,
they're
but
not going to get
I
traffic
just,
there really. But
I know, but I just feel like they shouldn't have that much of a voice.
I think
I
if you're
don't know.
talking about buildings, especially large buildings that are butting up against them,
Okay,
right
right,
at
which
the
is,
western
well,
edge of the
then why don't
quadrangle,
they
sure.
get, so where were they a few years ago? Why shouldn't they have been, pounding the pavement and telling the council, the community development, hey, we want some zoning now because we don't want to see that. Because
Some of them
now
were,
the stuff has
some
been
of them
sold.
were.
Were they? All right,
Yeah. Oh
well,
yeah, sure.
well then
But
somebody fell down on the job. Yeah,
well,
that's
I
for
think what
sure.
happened was
Yeah.
is that the city council didn't do much of anything.
They did, I know,
And
they
then
fell down on the job. Yeah.
this company came in,
And they
I'm
just
actually
kept buying
spacing
things.
out on the name of the
Yeah.
company now, but they
LL
just,
some, yeah.
yeah,
They just bought up
they
everything.
bought up, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of properties.
I mean, did they think that wasn't going to get sold? I mean, come on.
Somebody has to be asleep if they didn't
Yeah,
realize that in
I
fact,
know.
Cambridge real estate, no
Anyway,
matter where, is
so
actually pretty much a hot property right now. So now the Cambridge City Council is playing catch up,
yeah,
and
but
it
it's
doesn't
very
have a
restrictive.
plan.
It's like saying if they have any, unless they have some kind of permitting process, forget it. You can't do any of this. They have to,
Right. But
and
there is a
it's,
time limit on this moratorium. So
2 years.
we'll see. But yeah,
Yeah.
but investment money probably wants to flow now. And we'll see what happens. But anyway, so they passed through a second reading, and it'll come to a final vote in a couple of
Yeah.
weeks, and it'll pass in one form or another. All right. So anyways, those are some of the big items from
What'd you think of, this was, I mean, not a big item, but it kept getting charter righted, the Charlie cards. I thought that was interesting because I haven't followed it that much, but I was interested in some of the comments last night.
Listen,
Because
if
of the
I was
free
a high
Charlie
school,
card, what?
if I was a high school student, somebody said, would you, here's a choice.
Yeah,
Would you like to
that's
pay
it.
bus fare or not? I'd say,
right,
sure.
and-
I'd rather give me a free card.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right, and
course,
yet
who wouldn't want that?
Carlone had a comment, well, the people of privilege aren't going to want these. Oh, come on, you offer something
Everybody
free.
wants it.
Every high school, everybody wants it. And I think the point that Nolan's point about, well, are we talking about all Cambridge high school students? Because then it's too vague, because you don't have to live in Cambridge to be a high school student here, So they have to obviously work on the language, but
Now isn't
everybody
it
wants
true
something
that
for free. I mean,
but isn't simultaneously Baran
What?
Azim and others are looking
What?
into a fare-free pilot program for
oh,
buses?
for regular buses.
Yeah. So
I thought
maybe-
for a particular bus line. Well, they have that in Boston. They have the 20
Yeah.
or something, one of the buses.
right.
But that's a separate thing. But that would be for adults.
Yeah, but it is, and again, I'm not critical of it. To me, I was a beneficiary of a free bus pass for a while when I was working
When
at
MIT, I know.
and it was kind of nice having it,
No,
so
I think,
I kind of
and they're
like
right.
that. It was great.
And they can't have a means test. It has to be to all high schools. But I think they should
Right.
be, and it should be to the 2 charter schools, as Nolan said.
Right.
And it should be the high school. And technically it should be BB&N too, I guess, but I don't, I
Yeah.
think they're being driven or they have their own cars. I mean, I'm being very,
Yeah, but one thing, one
elitist here, but I
observation
don't
I'm going
know.
to make, which is that
Yes,
political people have never seen a program involving giving people something that they
yeah,
didn't
right.
like.
So does that
So
mean the city pays for those Charlie cards?
it depends on what their relationship with the MBTA is. If I would imagine the answer is yes, unless the MBTA
Okay.
says we'll cover the costs, then we'd have to pay the fare. So
I think they shouldn't be handed out. I think that the students have to ask for them. And I think that would already single some people out, which is
right.
fine.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, anyway, so that
see where
was
that goes.
yeah. So
It was,
that's
it was,
what.
it was tabled so they could clean up the language, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, so we'll see where that's really going. So anyway, so those were some of the
Yeah.
items that I thought were of some interesting import. There was at the previous meeting, there were some other items of that I thought of were noteworthy. I think maybe what I'm going to do is just try switching over to some of
Yeah.
those right here, right now, and just to maybe make a few comments. So this is at the April 25th meeting.
Right.
You know, after all the COVID stuff, whatever. One of
Yeah.
the things I actually found interesting was there was this report. Remember, there was a lot of controversy about hostile architecture.
Yes.
You
Yep.
know, it was,
Mhm.
there were, remember there was the big controversy of people who had torn them out of the Central Square T stop and
Yes. Yes.
whatever. So I don't think that's really been settled, but the actually Councilor Carlone, I think, was exactly right on in complimenting the report that came out of a combination of community development and public works department on sort of more of a balanced
Okay.
approach.
I didn't read it. So what did it say? I didn't.
Basically, it acknowledges the fact that, that if you come up with benches, for example, that have dividers in the middle that
Mhm.
prevent people from lying down,
Mhm.
the classic image being that of a bunch of drunks lying down on benches in the
Yeah.
city square, right?
Yeah.
uh that and that becomes sort of a problem. So
Mhm.
it's you could argue that it's hostile to families
Mhm.
to have that, but then it would
Yeah.
be very hostile to others to not have, to put those dividers in there.
Well, part
So
of it is an ADA accommodation, right?
yeah, well,
Americans
that's right.
Disability Act.
And
Yeah.
certainly that was the
Yeah.
point that MBTA
Right.
made about that. So
Right.
I think that there really are
Mhm.
some balancing acts that are appropriately done there. I always thought Central Square would be sort of good if there was a combination, some that were divided
I mean, if I
ones,
was sitting down at
some
a
which
bench,
were
I
not.
wouldn't mind a separation from the next person. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I don't
You
know.
know, so I would say, as long as you've got enough
Yeah.
benches to spare, have a
Yeah.
mix. And people can
A
pick and
mix.
choose.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's essentially what it said in the report?
Yeah, yeah. Now,
Okay.
another thing that was
Yeah.
quite significant at that
Yeah.
council
Mhm.
meeting was
Yeah.
yet another continuation of the bike lane frenzy of North Mass Ave and Porter Square in particular. Right. And there was, the city
There,
council did
yeah.
approve. It was a
Yeah.
made subject to the charter, right? But they did approve
Oh,
a,
you're talking about the April 25th meeting, right, where they had
yes.
150 commenters, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
people went one after another,
Okay.
a lot of
Yeah.
scripted comments
Oh,
and
we thank you for
yeah.
this, but yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And, but basically what they did was they said, well, let's allow the delay in the quick build, which would normally be forced by ordinance to happen, even
Right.
if it was a kind of a silly thing to be doing right now. So
Mhm.
they allow for some delay. All right.
Yeah.
And some modification in the design. So some stuff proceeds, some does not. But then what happened then, there were two city council orders that I think there was at least some hope that they might actually have some
Oh, yeah.
support that basically would have said, look, let's actually make official a delay here so that we can actually do the job right, which is what
But it
I think.
was gonna be a very long delay.
That's a matter of opinion about what
Well, yeah.
constitutes very long. But in the end, there was, I think,
Mm.
some hope that I think the sponsors were Denise Simmons, Paul
Paul
Toner,
Toner,
and Dennis
Carlone,
Carlone.
but he dropped out of one of them.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, I got to give Dennis Carlone credit for
Mhm.
actually,
Yeah.
saying, look, this is what I think is really the right way to do the planning, even if there's people who are going to be critical of me for breaking a pledge, and that took a certain
Yeah.
amount of courage to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
but in the end, the pressure was just too great. And Patty Nolan, who was supposedly going to vote with them, chose not to.
Oh,
And
she was? I didn't realize she
yeah,
was.
she was supposed to.
Oh,
And then
she
there
saw the
was one
writing
of,
on the wall there. Yeah.
yeah. So I think a lot of this is political pressure when you really get down to it. It's not a matter of just doing what's right here. So um, one thing that was kind of interesting to me that actually became part of that discussion, though, was there was a point where all the councils would taking
Yeah.
turns speaking about
You're
it.
going to talk about McGovern and his math?
Not McGovern in his math, but actually Burhan Azim in his math.
Oh, okay.
And again, I don't want
Right. He
to.
was referring to accidents or something.
Right. And I'm not saying this to sort of be mean about it. It's just that,
Yeah.
in a political situation, you sort of want to sort of score points by, appealing to people's emotions and whatever.
Yeah.
And Councillor Azim certainly made it seem as though he was saying that as a person in his age range, and he was quoting statistics from the CDC,
Yeah.
about mortality figures and whatever, what's the most likely cause of death for a person 15 to 24. Actually, it was in those ranges.
Okay.
So I actually went and he said, you can just look it up on CDC. So I actually did that. And I was actually looking what the actual figures are.
Yeah.
And, he kind of left with the impression that the single most unsafe, the single most dangerous thing you can do, the most likely way you're going to die when you're in that relatively, and by the way, very few people die in that age range. It's really nice to be young, but when they do, what is the actual most probable causes of death? And it wasn't by being killed on a bicycle. I mean, yes, it happens, and we should do what we can to minimize such risks, but the actual risks are quite different. What he was describing, I think he was kind of misleading a little bit on what's called unintentional injury, which includes things like motor vehicle accidents and poisoning, drowning, and other things. But if you actually
so is this from the CDC website? You
Yes.
did this? Wow.
I just pulled the numbers off the CDC
Wow.
site. So I
Huh.
just want to say here that
Yeah.
if you actually look at of all the people, the different ways to buy the farm within the ranges of, let's say, ages 15 to 34. Thankfully, they don't have many of the things that affect older people just don't barely show up. Poisoning, but poisoning
unbelievable.
Poisoning includes drug overdoses.
Oh, that's a funny way to put it, though. Yeah.
Well, but it's the clinical.
I know,
approach.
but it's confusing to me. I watch too many murder.
Right, but you ingest something in one form or another, it causes your demise. So the actual worst, if when you're a young person between the ages of 15 and 34, drug overdoses is a pretty serious matter. And certainly I can point to the fact that I've known of the deaths over the last, because if you spend time in Central Square and you talk to the police, about drug overdoses, and that there have been people who have died. And that's actually, people in that age range, that's really what that's killing people more so. I'm
surprised it's not even a higher age range. I thought they died
but
above 34.
Right, but so that comes in first, and then suicide is actually a pretty serious matter for people within that age range. Again, we're not talking about many people, but
so you're just looking at that age range because of what he brought up.
Because of what he brought up.
Okay,
and then
all right.
And there's homicides, and we all know there have been homicides in
more
Cambridge
pedestrian deaths
of young people.
Deaths,
one very, very sad one up on Pemberton, by the basketball courts, the tennis courts over the past year. When you get down there, pedestrians is 1.6% of all deaths. Bicyclists is 0.2%. It's very, very low percentage.
But again, what is this looking at? What community? I mean,
this is national statistics. Now
that's all 6,000 people out of a.
No. You're not looking at the numbers correctly.
I know that's what I don't understand.
But I'm just saying is that if you look at the numbers nationally, the likelihood of cause of death is actually, bicycling is still a pretty safe thing to do. Right. Okay. It's actually, of course, there are more pedestrians than there are cyclists, which is the reason why there's probably 8 times as many pedestrian deaths as there are cycling deaths.
Right.
And
right.
so I just, my only criticism is one should not overstate what the,
Absolutely. Or the
you know, what
deaths
the,
that have happened in
yeah.
Cambridge too.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
have had people who are dying
Yeah.
of suicide in this city, and people
Yeah.
who are dying
No,
of
it's true.
homicide and other causes as well,
I think I
and
saw somebody commented on your website. I've never seen any comments, but there were 3. And somebody referred to what you're talking about.
yeah,
Did you see that?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and by the way, there's also there's big differences, based on parts of the country, urban environments versus rural,
Oh,
male
sure.
versus female, high income, low income. You can cut it up in 100 different ways. I'm just saying is that
Was guns in there? I didn't see that. What was that under?
homicide would be under
Oh,
homicide.
homicide.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, the only point I really wanted to make about that was that let's
Is that
not, while everybody's getting worked up
exactly.
about bike
I
lanes
know.
or
And that I'm
whether
going
they
to
should be
die if you don't
separated
do
or not.
this. Right.
Yeah, and we're just completely ignoring the fact that
I
actually
know.
there's so much greater risk for people
I know.
from
That's
so
a
many
very
other
good point.
sources.
You're right.
And let's have a
Okay,
little
so we only
perspective.
have about a minute left. I wonder, there was supposed to be a meeting on municipal broadband, a committee meeting on Thursday, and now it says Zoom meeting, not televised. So
Yeah.
why is that?
That's because the chair decided to do it that way. That's
But I
constitutional.
can't, that means I can't tape it. If I'm not here, I can't see it.
Yeah,
Right?
there should be a way that they should have
Really?
the
Okay.
recordings of the Zoom
Well,
meetings
hopefully,
available, but I
yeah,
haven't
I just
seen
thought
that.
that's
I don't know how
interesting.
that's done just yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah,
Right, we'll find that out, right, yeah, okay.
right.
All right, so anything else
Oh, the
coming?
last thing is just to say.
Oh,
we can
trash
talk-
carts, trash carts. If you don't
Yeah,
like your
so-
trash cart, May 17th, you better
So
get
they'll
in
be
that
coming,
request to
they'll be
change
coming
it.
next month in June, I think, right?
June, yeah, everyone got a postcard. They
Right.
all got these
So,
postcards, yeah.
we don't want what they're prescribing for my house. We want the smaller ones, so.
Well, did
we
you
have
put
to
in your
actually contact-
request? You
Not
have
yet,
to
but
fill out a form. You better
but
do
we
it.
will be.
May 17th.
anyway, we're
Okay.
just about out of time, so we'll see you again
Yeah.
soon on
All
Cambridge
right,
Inside Out.
bye.